Glamis, the family home of the Queen Mother, has almost as many ghost stories associated with it as does Hampton Court. They include Earl Beardy, a vampire, the Grey Lady, and the tongueless woman, who is the subject of this little story. Over a number of years during the last century and continuing almost to the present day, many people have reported having the same experience at Glamis. They all concern the figure of a woman dressed in white or pale-colored flowing clothes, running through the grounds at night. The woman approaches the witnesses until her face is only inches from them. And then, with a pleading look on her face, she gestures towards her mouth, which she opens to reveal that it is full of blood, and that her tongue has been either cut or torn from its roots. The apparition then either runs away into the darkness or simply disappears. Other, slightly different reports tell a different version. This takes place during daylight hours, and the witnesses all report virtually the same story. While walking around the outside of the castle, for no obvious reason, they find themselves almost forced to look upwards. And there, at a barred window high in the wall, they see a waving hand. The hand belongs to a pale-faced woman who makes a beckoning movement and then makes an appealing gesture and points to her open mouth, which drips blood from the roots of her missing tongue. To illustrate the story, let me tell you of just one experience, which happened to a guest at the castle in the early part of this century. He was taking a stroll around the outer wall of the castle when he saw the white face at the window, begging for help. He approached the window and was about to speak to the face when it disappeared rapidly backwards, and the startled guest heard a horrifying scream from the room. The scream was cut off suddenly at its highest point. In the complete silence which followed, the guest tried to decide what to do. Should he go for help? Try to find the room in the castle? Tell his host what he had seen? As he hesitated, he heard a sound coming from the base of the tower in which the room lay. With a creaking which started the hairs on the back of his neck prickling, the ancient door at the base of the tower slowly opened. The guest stepped into concealment behind a bush and watched. As the door swung completely open, he saw the figure of a bent old woman emerge from the door carrying a large bundle over her back. The guest stepped from his hiding place, and the woman swung to look at him. Then, with a rapidity which was surprising in someone of her age, she turned and scuttled away across the grounds. The guest hurried into the castle and sought out the Earl and told him his strange story. The Earl made little of his guest's experience and went with him to the door of the tower. When they tried it, they found that it was firmly locked. The Earl finally persuaded his guest that he had either seen the ghost or imagined the whole thing. And there the matter might have rested, had it not been for something which happened to the guest over 20 years later, when he was holidaying in Italy. He was climbing in the Alps one day when a sudden heavy blizzard overtook him and he was trapped in the snow. He passed out from the cold And when he regained consciousness, he found that he had been rescued by monks from a remote monastery. They gave him shelter and food, and slowly he recovered. When he was able to move freely about the monastery, he found himself sitting and discussing with the monks strange experiences which they had had over the years. The monks told him about a mystery woman who lived in a nearby nunnery. They told him that the woman had discovered some terrible secret about an ancient family back in Britain. The woman had been silenced in the most savage way. Her tongue was cut out, and her hands chopped from her body. The woman had then been smuggled out of the castle and transferred to a local nunnery. Later, she had been moved to the place where she now lived. After much discussion, the monks agreed to make arrangements for the guest to meet the silenced woman. When he arrived at the nunnery, he was taken down corridors to a small, barely furnished nun's cell, and there, praying at a small prie-dieu, was a woman in a nun's habit. Hearing him enter, she turned, and there before him he saw again, though many years older, the face of the woman he had seen at the window of Glamis castle. A somewhat drastic method of ensuring that the secret of the sealed room would never be disseminated, but undeniably effective. Oh, if you discover a secret that you shouldn't, remember the watchword, won't you? Shh.